If you've been keeping up with my last two videos, then it would make sense that this video should be self-explanatory. In the video before this one, I explained how the nation of Israel is actually the church, and the church is actually the nation of Israel. In the video before this one, as in my last video, I explained how the prophets that we consider to be of the Old Covenant, because they lived in that time, their actual prophecies, most of it was actually the foundation for the New Covenant. Then I ended that video explaining that if we can understand these two things, then it's pretty clear that the end times circulate around Christians. The reason why this is important to understand is, if it is true, then that means a lot of people are looking at the wrong measuring stick and looking at the wrong focus of what the end times circulates around. If it is true that the nation of Israel literally took on the new covenant and took on those of the nations, the Gentiles, that were added to the nation of Israel, thus the nation of Israel is what we call the church, then that means Jacob's trouble that's spoken about in the book of Jeremiah is actually the church's trouble. A lot of people would find this hard to believe because of a lot of teachings that have been taught throughout I don't know how many years now. But so far in the past few videos of this playlist, I clearly demonstrated that technically the nation of Israel is the church, and that the Old Testament prophecies are the foundation of the new covenant, which means those end-time prophecies must circulate around Israel, and if the church is Israel, that means it circulates around us. My video playlists, Destroying Golden Calves, and the playlist on the Antichrist, already goes through a lot of information that I could put in this video. So I would redirect you all to those videos if you want more information on what I've already spoken about regarding this subject, regarding the religion of Christianity, deceptions, the golden calves that have been set up, who the Antichrist really is, the mark of the beast, all these things. I've already kind of covered them when I was in identifying the problem. In this video, I'm just trying to reconcile all of this by showing that if the new covenant has been given to Israel, and the church is in reality the nation of Israel, then that means the Great Tribulation and all of these things that a lot of Christians say is going to be happening to the natural Jews, and God's going to be bringing the natural Jews to these processes and all of that, is technically not true. It's technically not true. Especially when the church, as in Israel today, is full of Christians that are still breaking the covenant. Most people don't even know what the covenant is. And just so there's no confusion, I'm not trying to say that God is not going to have a time where he brings Israel back into himself, as in the old Israel that fell away and so on. I do believe that. And I believe that when that time does come, if it isn't happening already, all it really means is that those who were part of old Israel who fell away, that Paul said that God is going to be bringing back in, they just have to do what the rest of everyone else has to do if they want to partake of being part of Israel, being part of the church. They need to repent and start following Jesus and believing in Jesus and following him in the gospel. It really doesn't require the entire church to be raptured out of here, and all that's left is natural-born Jews, and then they have to start all over and coming into the church. The Bible doesn't actually say that that is what's going to happen. Now, regarding the end times circulating around Christians, in the prophets, we find some pretty intense stuff. Isaiah says that the reason why the day of the Lord is coming and many men are going to be burnt with fire and few men will be left is because of the breaking of God's laws, statutes, and his eternal covenant. That's the new covenant. Isaiah was speaking about the future. There's never been a time in history where the entire earth has been burnt and few men have been left. It's going to happen, which means it's going to happen in our covenant, and the reason why it happens is because people, Christians, have broken the covenant. So here's a prime example of what I mean by this stuff circulates around Christians. There's a lot of Christians today that don't even want to be called Christian. Technically, the term Christian is slowly becoming a proverb or a curse word. If you talk to a child of God who's truly trying to follow and seek Jesus and follow in his ways, they try not to even associate with the title Christian. Did you guys know that that's in Isaiah? It's in Isaiah 65:14-15. It says, "Behold, my servants will sing for joy of heart, but you will cry for sorrow of heart, and will wail for anguish of spirit. You will leave your name for a curse to my chosen, and the Lord he who is will kill you. He will call his servants by another name. And if you take a look at verse 11, you'll see that he was speaking about his own people who forsook him. So now, already, Christians today, as in true followers of Jesus, are already putting aside the title Christian. They're ready to get a new name from the Lord. They don't even want to be associated with the term Christian because the term Christian is associated with hypocrisy, sin, filth, fake Jesuses, fake church. Right? And these are just a couple examples. There are a number of prophecies about the end times that, when you look at them, they actually do fit the description of the church. In the end of Zechariah 12, it talks about the reestablishment of Jerusalem. And from what I understand, this is actually before Jesus returns. Because in Zechariah 14, we have an established Jerusalem being attacked, and then Jesus returns. But regarding Zechariah chapter 12, in verse 11 to 14, it talks about how the land is going to mourn each family apart. You have David's family, you have the house of Nathan, you have the house of Levi, and you also have the house of Shimeites, if I pronounced that correctly. Then it says, all families and so on apart. I found this verse very interesting, and I asked Jesus about it. What I received, which you all can pray about, is that the fact that individual family names were mentioned first before all families generally speaking actually meant something. I heard that David's house represented the kings or pastors. I heard that Nathan's house represented the prophets. I heard that the Levites' house represented the priests or teachers. And I heard that the house of the Shimeites, that represents those that were hating on those who were operating in the truth, who still continued in the title of Christian. So in other words, those who were divided. The history with this particular individual was he was the one that was speaking evil about David, and he was sided with Saul. So the point is, all of these particular families, their titles and the offices they operated in, or their behavior that they're known for, happens to be relevant in the church today. If that's true, then this prophecy easily can apply to the church. And again, this has not happened yet, guys. This is talking about Jerusalem being reestablished and them mourning for the Lord, or mourning for him as one mourns for their firstborn son. This is what Revelations references in chapter 1 regarding the coming of Jesus. But what's interesting is, in this particular chapter of Zechariah, it's not actually speaking about the coming of Jesus yet. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to stress here is that a lot of these Old Testament prophecies, literally, it's very easy to see them reflect in the New. And I don't even want to call them Old Testament prophecies because realistically, as I said in the last video, these prophecies are and have been proven to be the foundation of what we call the New Covenant. Part of the foundation. Even in the book of Daniel, when it talks about the king of the north, who turned out to be Antiochus Epiphanes, during the time of the Greek rule, he came, he set up the abomination of desolation in the temple. He set up a statue of the head Greek god, or he set up an altar for him, and he named the temple after this Greek god. And Antiochus Epiphanes did all these things that Daniel said was going to happen, that Daniel received from the Word of God. But then in our records of the New Testament, in the Gospels, Jesus references this again. Now remember, by the time Jesus showed up, this had been long gone. It had probably been about 150 years previously or something along those lines, maybe more. But Jesus said this is going to happen again. And throughout the rest of the records of the New Testament we find out that this is what we call the Antichrist spirit. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be going into explicit detail about all of this. The point that I'm trying to show here is that these prophecies we call Old Testament, because of how the Bible's been organized, isn't exactly accurate. The Old Testament, the Old Covenant, was the laws of Moses. Then we have the books of history and the Chronicles. And then we have the prophets. And these prophets, even though they spoke to Old Covenant Israel, were rebuking them and correcting them and trying to get them into check, as recorded in the books of history. they spoke a lot about the coming new covenant, which is where we are today. And we can read these pages and actually see how it affects Christians today. I'm going to end this video here because, as I said, if you want more information on this kind of thing regarding these prophecies, the Antichrist spirit, end time stuff, those other two playlists I mentioned are the best ones to check out to see what I have said about it already. Hopefully you've already watched them, since I did ask if possible that people watch these videos in order. In my next video, I'm going to talk about false prophets, false teachers, very lightly because I already covered those in those other playlists I mentioned. But I'm also going to talk about Christian witches. I'm also going to talk a little bit more about false Christs. I'm going to talk about a lot of issues that people don't even talk about today. I'm going to bring them up in the next video. And I'm going to be speaking about some challenges, hurdles, trials, and tribulations that pop up in this new covenant that were not actually problems in the old covenant. The reason why this is so important to take a look at or listen to is because you might be going through some things right now, not realizing that, hey, this is a problem that you may need to pray about, or certain prayers you may never have thought of even praying because of what's going on in the world today that a lot of people don't know is going on. So my next video, hopefully it'll be edifying and help you out with a little bit of spiritual warfare and being on guard with certain things in this present covenant that was not a problem in the old.